Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about something that you see on your screen right now, and that is how to go about preparing for master's oral examinations. This is for candidates who are appearing for master oral exams for less than 45 meters vessel. Now, this is for Australian candidates only, or candidates who are appearing for their exams in Australia. The checklist that I'm going to take you through today is the checklist that the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, or AMSA, provide for their candidates. And although the checklist is pretty self-explanatory, the tips I want to give you today or shared with you today is what will benefit you when you start preparing for oral examination. All right, so let's get started. So you can find this checklist on the AMSA website. If you search for it, that is where I got it from. And depending on when you're watching this video, make sure that you download the updated checklist. And the checklist, as you can see, is divided into certain sections. So we start with management and shipmaster's business. Then we have standards of watchkeeping, bridge equipment, navigational charts and publications, stress and stability, cargo work, marine engineering systems, ship handling. It goes on to the next page where we have prevention of pollution, emergency situations, response and equipment, dry docking, search and rescue, essential shipboard equipment and machinery, and collision regulations. So 2 pages, but there's lots to study. Now, if you look at these sections, you will see that pretty much every topic under the sun is listed here. And you might be wondering as to how do you go about preparing for such a vast syllabus. So remember that they will be asking you questions based on this checklist. But for masters under 45 meters, you have to remember the way you respond to these questions you have to keep on referring to particularly Australian laws and regulations and conventions. Uh, in that regard, the most important one is the NSCV, or National Standards of Coastal Vessels. And the NSCV has been introduced a few years back, and surveyors expect you to know about that. Um, and as a master, you also cannot say that you will consult master. So of course, it is your duty to take action if any question is asked of you. You refer to the safety. Safety becomes very important at all times. You manage safety of the vessel, the crew, and the cargo. Rather, the crew, the ship, and then the cargo, in that order. But remember that for masters under 45 meters, they will be looking out for any response that particularly is applicable to vessels less than 45 meters. That is what they're looking out for. So traditionally, if you have been sailing on even smaller ships than 45 meters or bigger ships than 45 meters, what they would like to know from you is how would you go about managing ships less than, or vessels rather, less than 45 meters? What rules apply to them? uh, Especially state laws, what is included under the NSCV framework, and how you have to manage it, particularly for vessels of less than 45 meters. So, although these topics that you see under different sections can be applicable to vessels of any length. So, even if someone is preparing for master's oral examination for greater than 45 meters, they can go as per this checklist. However, it is the way you respond to the questions asked in the oral examination that will distinguish you for a vessel, for a master of less than 45 meters. So make sure that before you go for oral examination, you brush up on all your local laws, conventions, regulations, state laws, if any, um, especially with respect to, let's say, vessels under 45 meters. You will have lesser complement of people, how you go about managing their workload, fatigue management, safety aspect of it, workload allocation. Remember that ship reporting systems may be also slightly different when you are transiting the coast of Australia. That's how it makes a difference as well. OHS, WHS, so that is work health and safety, or occupational health and safety. That is becomes very important as well. So marine orders, the national law, all that is given here. So again, you are not expected to know everything. As long as you talk, can you talk a little bit about it, and you know where to find the information from. and the surveyor will be happy about it. So for example, if they ask you about marine orders, you should know where to go and look for marine orders, which are the popular marine orders and where you can find information regarding them, especially the safety, the firefighting one, the load lines, um, Maritime Labour Convention, which comes under Marine Order 11 now, basic load line rules. So again, remember, if there is anything that is particularly applicable for vessels under 45 meters, you have to know that. Now, I'm assuming you will know that because you have been uh, sailing on vessels less than 45 meters, and that is why you are applying for oral examination. So remember to brush up your knowledge, particularly about what is particularly applicable on such vessels, and that is what they want to know from you. So although they might ask you a very generalized question about certificates and survey schedules and notices, including conditions, you have to make sure that you include that point which is particularly applicable to vessels less than 45 meters. All right. Again, when it happens to when it comes to standards of watchkeeping, maintaining a proper lookout. So again, you have to talk about the aspect that you might be mostly transiting coastal areas. So what is something that is particularly of concern there, and how do you go about managing it? Um, Watch keeping in different conditions, especially restricted visibility, congested waters, anchoring, again in coastal waters where normally vessels less than 45 meters transit in. So you get the point. So any answer, any question that you are answering, it's more from the point of less than 45 meters. So they will not expect you to know everything for more than 45 meters or 100 meters, 200 meters. These days you have ships more than 250, 300 meters as well. They will expect you to be able to answer these questions, especially from the point of a view of a master who's sailing on less than 45 meters. Berthing, unberthing becomes important here as well. How do you go about berthing or unberthing a vessel of less than 45 meters? How do the dynamic forces or static forces act on those vessels? When do you use a bow thruster? If you don't have a bow thruster, how do you go about managing or handling that ship? Anchoring a vessel like that of that size. What happens if you get severe weather warning? What happens if you get heavy weather warning? You know, Restricted visibility. So how do you go about managing the safe speed in restricted visibility, special requirements of the engine, so on and so forth. So again, with regulations, rules of the road, the collision regulations is pretty much generalized for all kind of ships. But again, if you are using, or if you are kind of vessel that is using the inland channel of a traffic separation scheme of a narrow channel, then you have to make sure that you mention what you will be doing, especially when you are transiting these areas, especially in the inland channel. All right. What else can I say? That dry dock, again, dry docking becomes very important because vessels of less than 45 meters may have special conditions or special requirements when going into dry dock. Their stability requirements will be different. So make sure that you study up on that as well. So always try to contextualize your answers to vessels of less than 45 meters. Don't say something that you've just read out of the book and memorized out of the book, which may not be applicable to your kind of a vessel. When I say your kind of a vessel, I mean vessel of less than 45 meters. Try to always contextualize your answer, make it applicable to kind of ship that you will be sailing on. Talk like a master. Say what you would actually do on the ship and not something that you've just memorized or learned out of the book. Never say that, this is what used to happen on my last ship. Don't say that, because if you have learned something wrong or incorrect, then you are pretty much repeating the same thing. Say what is right by practices of seamanship, or that you can refer to a publication or a book or a convention, law, regulation. You have to know your law very well, especially your state laws or laws that are applicable for vessels of less than 45 meters. Similarly, your stability requirements, effects of weight distribution on such vessels. How do you go about ensuring that the vessel is stable? What kind of GM do you sail out with? So these are little things. So I'll give you an example. I used to sail mostly on container ships and general cargo vessels. So when I would go for my oral examination, the surveyor, and I used to sail on vessels of more than 100 for 45 meters, of course. But I would remember that the surveyor would expect me to know everything about containers and cargo ships. ships that I've been sailing on. Although they would ask me about tankers and ro-ros and passenger ships, but when it comes to container ships and cargo ships, they would ask me these little questions about the kind of GM we sail out with. Why do we sail out with jet GM? Or how do we go about loading weights on deck, under deck, which was especially applicable to kind of the vessels I am sailing on, because they expect you to know everything about the kind of ships you're sailing on. All right, I think I'm pretty much repeating myself here, so I'll stop the video. I hope you have got some idea of how to go about preparing your ship, or rather preparing yourself for orals examination. If you're going for oral examination under 45 meters, remember, although the topics that you think are quite universal and they pretty much look the same, when you download the checklist, remember to contextualize your answer, include points which are very relevant to vessels of less than 45 meters, because when you mention those points, the surveyor will be impressed. He or she will know that you know your ship very well and you know what applies to it. Thank you for watching today's video, and bye for now.